Hey guys, this is Raze with Black Dragon Tech, bringing you another video about Guild Wars 2. With its release less than 10 days away, I'm getting really hyped up, and so I just wanted to make a video about the different professions, my thoughts and opinions, some pros and cons about each of the professions. Because in my own experience, I was completely ready to play a Ranger and a Guardian upon launch, but after playing in the beta weekend, I could honestly see myself playing any of the professions. Only with the exception maybe for the Engineer. Goblin Techies is just not my thing, but they really have a lot of variation in each of the classes to make them feel unique and make them feel powerful. So all of this information is pre-launch. It's all beta experience, theory crafting, watching other videos that other people have made. So it's not perfect is what I'm saying. It's, you know, relevant to change when the game comes out. Also, they're balancing anything like that. With all that said, two of the main features of Guild Wars 2 that influenced my ideas about professions were mostly the active combat model, as well as just how beautiful this game looks. The combat in this game is so active because all of your spells can be cast while moving, with the exception of a couple few ultimates and things like that. It really gives you a lot of freedom to move around, to really kite your target, as well as everyone has that natural dodge, so you're always moving and you're not restricted by mana. The only class I've seen with any kind of resource bar is the Thief, and I'm really hoping that changes because every other class is just upon your cooldowns. So as fast as you can cast stuff and as fast as those cooldowns come down, you can be moving and killing your target in any form you want to. Secondly, like I said, this game is so beautiful with the spell effects that playing an Elementalist is pretty much just like watching an Olympic ice skater with a flamethrower. So, to get started with, I want to talk about the Warrior. The pros of the Warrior: he has many different weapons at his disposal, a lot more than the other melee classes. You can pretty much use any of the melee weapons as well as the rifle, and I believe the short bow. The other really good thing about the Warrior is that he's a balanced fighter, meaning he can get in there, he can still take hits, and he can still do some pretty good damage. Another note is he actually has one of the strongest headshots, which is a ability on his rifle, which I've seen currently high, and I've heard other people talk about that. The cons to the Warrior is it's more melee than ranged. If you are going range, you're probably going to have to pick up a rifle, and a lot of times you're probably going to get kited around by the other more mobile range classes. The perk of the Warrior, kind of the class or the profession perk, is an adrenaline buildup, which actually gives you a second ultimate upon your weapon, depending on what your weapon is. So next up we have the Guardian. The pros of the Guardian is he's very survivable. It's probably the most tanky class. It's also one of the best supports of the game. He can actually use a staff. He can do some of the healing of Guild Wars 2. The cons of the Guardian: he has limited weapon choices, especially when it comes to range. I think the only one that's range is probably his staff or the torch. So you really have to get up there and get in people's faces. And I think that's why he's kind of a more survivable class, is because he's going to have to get up there. The perk of the Guardian is seals, or I would call them considered auras. You kind of have 3 different abilities that will proc about every 5 to 10 seconds. One of them is a shield, one of them is like a flame hit, so those things. And you can also trigger those to get the immediate effect. Next up we have the Thief. The Thief pros is he's a very mobile fighter. So even though he might be a little weaker than the other 2 melee classes, he's very good at getting in and out of combat. He also has a couple of invisibilities, a couple other tricks that allow him to stay alive while still doing some damage. Probably has the best single target damage as well. All the other classes usually focus on AoE or ranged or survivability. The cons to the Thief is that he has few weapon choices again. The only range choices are the short bow or pistols, and pistols and the short bow are actually really close, or are medium range. And the only two-headed weapon you can use is the short bow. The perk to the Thief is actually an ability called Steal, which gives you actually an ability from whatever you steal from. The Engineer, I truthfully didn't have enough time to play and was just not as interested in the class to really do a whole bunch of research on them. I'm sure they're great. They've got a lot of ranged options to them, a lot of cool rifle things. They have a flamethrower, turrets, healing turrets and damage turrets, plenty of grenades. They have an elixir gun, a whole bunch of crazy stuff. If you liked engineering in World of Warcraft or anything that involves teching or anything like that, the Engineer would probably be a really fun choice for you. So the Ranger, pros is he's very good at ranged combat, very decent melee as well. Probably has the longest shot of the game. His auto attack on the longbow deals more damage the further the target is away. And I think it has probably the longest range of an ability in the game. So you'll see a lot of archers or rangers up on the top of keeps defending it because they have the best range to shoot someone from. Cons is most every ranger is probably going to be pigeonholed into having a longbow, just because it's such a powerful weapon. Also, you're probably targeted a lot, especially because one of the themes of Guild Wars 2 is the combo fields. Any combo field a ranger can shoot through to add an effect to it, whether that's flame, or poison, or electricity. So rangers are probably the most heavily dependent on damage class. So I think you're going to be targeted a lot, and you're not really as mobile as some of the other classes at getting away. The Ranger perk is pets. You can actually have up to 4 pets on you at one time. You can kind of balance and throw in which one you need at what time. And they're actually pretty strong, I would say. They have their own abilities, and it kind of gives you that extra edge on what you need personally on your Ranger. You can fill in with your pet. So, the Necro. The pros in the Necro is he has lots of conditions. Conditions are essentially debuffs, or poisons, or bleeds that they can put onto someone that stay and do damage over time, or reduce their stats over time. Necros also have a lot of pets. I think at one time they can have 4 or 5 pets up at once. You can have your Blood Fiend, your Flesh Golem, and your 2 Bone Minions out, at least from what I know. I believe there's another pet or 2, but it really makes quite an army of the undead if you are a fan of the Diablo 2 Necro. And they also have one of the best perks of any of the professions. Their perk is a Death Lich form, where you actually have a second health bar that generates as you deal damage, as things die, as other things happen, this life bar will generate. And anytime you can switch to that form and do a lot of damage, you have a whole different set of abilities like fear, poisons, and everything that the Necro has. But the most powerful thing about it is it actually gives you a second health bar, allowing you to swap in and out and actually make you one of the tankiest casters in the game. The cons of the Necro is it's not a lot of direct damage from the Necro. It's more condition and poison based. You're very fluffy, and if the opponents you're going up against are very condition remove aspect, they'll be able to remove a lot of the damage or a lot of the hindering things you can do. Next up we have the Elementalist. Pros of the Elementalist is it has a lot of spells. You get a lot of variation because their class perk actually allows them to change their Elementalist type on their weapon. So if you're using a staff, you actually have 4 different sets of abilities, making that actually 20 different spells or abilities you can use from one weapon. And that's across all weapon sets. So it essentially gives you a lot of power to, and even though they're very similar, the fire and the water and those things like that, they all have kind of AoE and damage, they do have some differences. And if you get to master all those elemental types, you can really do some serious damage, some serious AoE damage. Elementalists have the most AoE abilities. They're very good at throwing lots of stuff in the air and doing lots of damage. Another one of the very interesting things is one of their elite skills gives them an elementalist weapon. They can actually summon for themselves and for other people around them that yet again changes their complete ability bar to like a fiery greatsword or an electric great hammer or an earthen shield, anything like that. They can actually give to their allies to kind of give you some more flavor in there. Cons of the Elementalist: it's a lot of control and a lot of decisions. You have a lot to work with those Elementalist abilities. You have 20 or 4 different sets of 5 you can work with at one time. So I can see it being very confusing which set you're on and what you really need to do to be a good Elementalist. It's also a lot of ground targeting. You don't have a lot of direct damage on one person. You're gonna have to be clicking a lot and knowing where those AoE abilities should go. Lastly, we have the Mesmer, which is a very unique caster archetype, as they are based around random effects and around their illusions they can create. This makes the Mesmers actually really powerful for PvP because they can create illusions that might trick your opponents into attacking that, using their big abilities for that illusion. As well as the random effects. Like I said, if you're casting a spell, it will usually attach a random condition to whatever you're attacking, whether that be a bleed, a poison, a snare, a slow, or a weakness. It's completely random. So it's kind of a positive and a negative. You might not always get what you need, but if you apply enough, you can really load someone with more conditions than even, say, the Necro could. As well as applying random conditions to your foes, it sometimes applies random boons or buffs to yourself. It really gives the Mesmer a sporadic feel. As well as being very sporadic, the Mesmer has the most utility-based spells. Compared to the other 2 casters, you have things like Portal, that will allow you to teleport some of your allies, or Mass Invisibility, making you kind of very much of a trickster. On the con side, you don't have as much direct damage as the other 2 spellcasters. You kind of have to use your trickery to maybe even kind of like a control, more of a control class than the others. Your class perk is your illusions. You can use them to detonate or to confuse your enemies. So, after all my research gathering and a little bit of soul searching, I decided I'm definitely going to have to pick up one of the mage classes, probably either the Mesmer or the Elementalist. Let's go do some awesome trickery things, and probably the Thief. And before I go, I did want to leave with a short teaser trailer from ArenaNet themselves. Really got me hyped up for the game.